They say money whispers, but power is silent. When 19-year-old Maya walked onto Royal Atlantic Flight 8082 wearing a faded hoodie and ripped jeans, head stewardess Veronica Holloway didn't see a passenger. She saw a target. She saw a glitch in her perfectly curated first-class cabin. Veronica spent 3 hours humiliating the girl, denying her service, and accusing her of theft, convinced she was protecting the airline's prestige. But when the police boarded the plane to drag the teenager off, Maya didn't pull out handcuffs. She pulled out a badge that made the captain's face go pale. You won't believe the karma that hit this flight attendant. The air inside the first-class cabin of Royal Atlantic Flight 882 to London. Heathrow smelled of white tea and expensive leather. It was a scent Veronica Holloway had spent 15 years perfecting. As the senior purser, Veronica considered the front cabin her personal kingdom. She was 42, with hair sprayed into an immovable blonde helmet and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, a smile that was currently twitching with irritation. Boarding was halfway done. The cabin was filling up with the usual suspects. Mr. Henderson, the tech CEO in 2A, who always drank 3 scotches before takeoff, Mrs. van der Hoven in 1F, the heiress who travelled with her own silk pillows, and a scattering of investment bankers in suits that cost more than Veronica's car. And then she walked in. Veronica's eyes narrowed as she watched the girl step through the aircraft door. She couldn't have been more than 19. She was black, with voluminous natural curls pulled back into a loose puff, but it was her attire that made Veronica stiffen. The girl was wearing an oversized charcoal grey hoodie that looked 2 sizes too big, distressed jeans with rips at the knees, and high-top sneakers that looked scuffed. Over her ears sat a pair of large, noise-cancelling headphones. She looked like she was heading to a college dorm, not a transatlantic flight in the world's most prestigious cabin. Veronica stepped into the aisle, effectively blocking the path. She plastered her signature icy smile onto her face. "Excuse me, sweetie," Veronica said, her voice pitched high and condescending, the way one might speak to a lost child. "Economy boarding is actually through the second door, or you can cut through the galley to get to the back. Rows 30 through 65 are that way." She pointed a manicured red fingernail toward the rear of the plane. The girl didn't respond immediately. She adjusted her backpack, sliding one headphone cup off her ear. Her eyes, a striking amber brown, met Veronica's with a calmness that was almost unsettling. "I know where economy is," the girl said. Her voice was soft but clear. "I'm in 1A. Veronica let out a short, sharp laugh, a sound meant to signal to the other passengers that a joke had been made. 1A? I think you must be mistaken. 1A is a window suite. It's a full-fare first-class seat." "I'm aware," the girl said. She reached into her back pocket and pulled out a boarding pass, holding it up. Veronica snatched it from her hand, scanning it aggressively. She was looking for the error. A printing mistake, a duplicate, a fraudulent upgrade code. But there it was, printed in bold, undeniable letters. Maya Sterling. Seat 1A. Priority 1. Veronica stared at the ticket, her mind racing. Sterling. The name sounded familiar, but she couldn't place it. Maybe some lottery winner? Or perhaps the daughter of a rapper or athlete. That had to be it. New money. Classless money. "Well," Veronica said, handing the ticket back with 2 fingers as if it were contaminated. "I suppose the computer doesn't make mistakes, even if it looks like one. Go ahead. But do try to keep your bag from hitting the other passengers. We value tranquility here." Maya didn't rise to the bait. She simply slid her headphones back on, stepped around Veronica, and dropped into the plush leather seat of 1A. She tossed her backpack onto the ottoman a careless gesture that made Veronica wince, and immediately pulled out a tablet. Veronica marched back to the galley, where a junior flight attendant, a nervous young woman named Sarah, was prepping the pre-flight champagne. "Can you believe that?" Veronica hissed, aggressively rearranging the napkins. "Believe what?" Sarah asked, glancing at the cabin. "The hoodlum in 1A, Veronica snapped. "Look at her. She looks like she hopped the turnstile at a subway station, not bought a $10,000 ticket. It lowers the tone of the entire flight. Mrs. van der Hoeven is going to be appalled." "She seems quiet enough," Sarah ventured timidly. "Should I offer her a pre-flight drink?" "No," Veronica ordered. "Don't waste the Dom Perignon on someone who probably thinks it's sparkling cider. Give her water, tap water, and keep an eye on her. People like that, they tend to take things that aren't bolted down." Sarah looked uncomfortable. "Veronica, that seems a bit. I am the senior purser, Sarah. I know how to spot trouble. That girl is trouble. Now, go serve Mr. Henderson his scotch." Veronica watched from behind the curtain as Sarah served the cabin. She saw Sarah hesitate at 1A, then place a plastic cup of water down instead of the crystal flute everyone else received. Maya didn't seem to notice. She was engrossed in her screen. "Enjoy the seat while you can," Veronica thought, a plan forming in her mind. "Because you don't belong here, and I'm going to make sure you know it." The plane reached cruising altitude, leveling off above the clouds. The fasten seatbelt sign flicked off with a soft chime. In first class, this was the signal for the real service to begin. The aroma of heated nuts and warm bread began to drift through the cabin. Veronica moved through the aisle with the grace of a predator, checking on her real passengers. She chatted animatedly with Mr. Henderson about his golf game and complimented Mrs. van der Hoeven's diamond brooch. When she reached row 1, her demeanor shifted instantly. The warmth evaporated, replaced by a cold, bureaucratic efficiency. Maya had her tray table down and was typing furiously on a laptop that looked surprisingly high-tech, a custom build, thick and rugged. "Meal choice," Veronica said flatly, not bothering to address her by name. Maya looked up, removing her headphones again. "I'm sorry?" "I need your meal choice. We have the lobster thermidor or the filet mignon," Veronica said, looking over Maya's head at the bulkhead wall. "I'll have the filet, please. Medium rare." "We're out of the filet," Veronica lied smoothly. She hadn't even checked the oven, but she knew there were plenty. "Priorities went to the frequent flyers. You understand." Maya paused, her eyes narrowing slightly. She glanced at the empty seat across the aisle where a menu sat open. "Okay, I'll have the lobster then. That contains shellfish. I assume you don't have allergies?" "We don't want a medical emergency diverting the flight," Veronica said, her tone implying that Maya would likely fake an allergy for attention. "I'm fine. The lobster is fine. And to drink? Do you have any cranberry juice?" "We have a vintage Merlot or a Chardonnay," Veronica said, ignoring the request. "But perhaps you're too young to appreciate those. I'll bring you a soda. I asked for cranberry juice. And I said I'll bring you what we have available," Veronica snapped, her mask slipping. "Look, miss, whatever your name is, we are very busy. This isn't a cafeteria. You take what you get." Before Maya could respond, a man in seat 2B, a younger guy in a sharp navy suit, probably a junior executive, leaned forward. "Excuse me? I actually heard you offer the filet to the gentleman behind me just a second ago. And I know you have cranberry juice. I saw it on the cart." Veronica whipped around, her face flushing. "Sir, I am managing the inventory based on passenger status and loyalty tiers. It's complicated logistics." "It sounds like you're just being rude," the man said, lowering his voice but keeping it firm. He looked at Maya. "You can have my cranberry juice if they run out." Maya offered the man a small, tired smile. "It's okay. Thank you, though." She looked back at Veronica. "Just water is fine." Again. Veronica glared at the man in 2B, marking him as an enemy, then turned back to Maya. "Fine, water." She stormed back to the galley, her heart pounding with indignation. How dare they? How dare that child question her? And how dare that passenger undermine her authority? "Sarah!" Veronica barked. Sarah jumped, nearly dropping a bread basket. "Yes, Veronica?" "That girl in 1A. Keep a close watch on her. I walked past and saw her typing on that laptop. It looked like code. Hacking software, probably." "Hacking?" Sarah frowned. "Veronica, she's just typing. It looked like a spreadsheet." "You're naive," Veronica scoffed. "And I think she's been drinking. I smell alcohol on her." "She's only had water," Sarah argued. "She probably brought her own. Flasks. It's what they do," Veronica said, layering her prejudice with fabrication. "If she acts up, even a little, I want to know. I'm going to write her up. We can have her blacklisted from the airline. Royal Atlantic doesn't need passengers like that." Veronica grabbed a pitcher of ice water. She marched back out to 1A. Maya was working, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Veronica leaned in to refill the plastic cup on Maya's tray. As she poured, the plane gave a slight, routine bump of turbulence. It was minor, barely a tremble, but Veronica used it. She lost her balance, tipping the pitcher forward. Ice-cold water cascaded over Maya's tray table, splashing onto her expensive mechanical keyboard and soaking the sleeve of her grey hoodie. "Oops," Veronica said, deadpan. She didn't move to help. Maya gasped, jumping up and shaking her hands. "What are you doing?" "Turbulence," Veronica said, shrugging. "You should have your cup more secure. Here." She tossed a handful of cocktail napkins onto the soaked mess. "Clean that up before it drips onto the carpet. The cleaning crew hates sticky stains." The cabin went silent. Even Mr. Henderson lowered his scotch. The malice was palpable. Maya stood there, water dripping from her hoodie. She took a deep breath, closing her eyes for a second. When she opened them, the amber color seemed to have darkened. The calm was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp focus. "You did that on purpose," Maya stated. "Don't be ridiculous," Veronica scoffed, turning her back. "Accidents happen. Maybe if you were dressed appropriately, you wouldn't be so worried about a little water." Maya didn't sit back down. She reached into a soaked hoodie pocket and pulled out a phone. "I'd like to speak to the captain, please." Veronica stopped dead in her tracks. She turned around slowly, a look of incredulity on her face. "You want to speak to Captain Miller? Because I spilled some water." "Sit down, little girl. The captain is flying the plane. He doesn't have time for your tantrums." "It's not a tantrum," Maya said, her voice rising just enough to carry through the quiet cabin. "It's a formal complaint regarding harassment and intentional damage to personal property. Get the captain. Now." "Sit. Down." Veronica stepped closer, invading Maya's personal space. "Or I will have you restrained for interfering with a flight crew member. That's a federal offense. Do you want to go to jail in London? I'm sure you'd fit right in." The tension in the cabin was thick enough to choke on. The man in 2B unbuckled his seatbelt, looking ready to intervene, but Maya held up a hand, signaling him to wait. Maya looked Veronica dead in the eye. "I am not sitting down until this is addressed," Veronica sneered. "Fine. You want to play the victim? Let's play." Veronica grabbed the cabin interphone and dialed the cockpit. "Captain, this is Veronica. We have a situation in first. A passenger is becoming aggressive and refusing instructions. Yes, seat 1A. I believe she's intoxicated. She's shouting at the crew. Yes, understood. She hung up and looked at Maya with a triumphant smirk. Captain says if you don't sit down, we're diverting to Gander, Newfoundland, and the police will be waiting. Is that what you want? Maya sat down slowly. She wasn't defeated. She was calculating. She dried off her keyboard with deliberate, slow movements. For the next hour, the flight was a nightmare. Veronica ignored Maya's call button. She cleared everyone's plates, but left Maya's dirty dishes sitting there for 40 minutes. She walked by and, accidentally, bumped Maya's shoulder with her hip every time she passed. Then came the final straw. Mrs. van der Hoven, in 1F, stood up to use the lavatory. She let out a sudden, high-pitched gasp. "My bracelet! My diamond tennis bracelet! It's gone!" The cabin stirred. "Are you sure, ma'am?" Sarah asked, rushing over. "I took it off to put on lotion," the older woman wailed. "I set it right here on the armrest. I closed my eyes for a nap, and now it's gone." Veronica appeared instantly, her eyes lighting up with a predatory gleam. She didn't look at the floor. She didn't look under the seat. She looked directly at Maya. "Well," Veronica said loudly, "we have had some unusual traffic in the aisle today." She turned to Maya. "You, stand up." Maya looked up from her tablet. "Excuse me?" "Stand up. Empty your pockets." "I didn't take her bracelet," Maya said, her voice hardening. "I haven't left my seat." "I saw you reaching across the aisle when she was sleeping," Veronica lied effortlessly. "I saw you eyeing it earlier. People like you can't help themselves, can you? You see something shiny and you just grab it." "People like me?" Maya repeated. "And what kind of people is that?" "Thieves," Veronica spat. "Now turn out your pockets or I'm calling the authorities to meet us at the gate. Actually, forget that. I'm searching your bag." Veronica reached for Maya's backpack on the ottoman. "Do not touch my bag," Maya warned, her voice dropping an octave. It wasn't a plea, it was a command. "I have the authority to search for stolen property," Veronica yelled, grabbing the strap of the backpack. Maya grabbed the other end. "You have no such authority. That is a violation of my privacy and airline protocol." "Let go!" Veronica yanked the bag. The zipper, which had been partially open, gave way. The contents of the bag spilled out onto the aisle floor. A laptop charger, a bag of trail mix, a heavy, leather-bound notebook, and a small black velvet pouch. Veronica gasped theatrically. She bent down and snatched the velvet pouch. "Aha! I knew it!" She held it up for the cabin to see. "Caught red-handed." Mrs. van der Hoven looked confused. That's not my bracelet pouch. Mine is blue." Veronica froze. She opened the black pouch. Inside wasn't a diamond bracelet. Inside was a heavy, silver and gold badge encased in a leather wallet. Below the badge was a laminated ID card with a holographic chip. Veronica stared at it. The cabin lights glinted off the gold lettering. Royal Atlantic Airways. Corporate governance name. Maya Sterling, title. Global Director of Audit and Standards. Clearance. Level 5. Executive Board, proxy. The silence that followed was louder than the jet engines. Veronica's hand trembled. She looked from the badge to Maya. Maya stood up. She smoothed down her damp hoodie. She didn't look like a teenager anymore. She looked like an executioner. "That," Maya said, pointing to the ID in Veronica's hand, "is property of the Royal Atlantic Board of Directors, and you are currently holding it without authorization." Veronica's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Sarah," Maya said, looking past Veronica to the terrified junior stewardess, "please call the cockpit. Tell Captain Miller that his boss is here, and tell him to bring the restraints. I have a crew member to arrest." The badge in Veronica's hand seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. She stared at the holographic chip, which shimmered under the cabin lights, changing from gold to royal blue. Global Director of Audit and Standards. This is fake, Veronica stammered, though her voice lacked its usual venom. It was thin, reedy, bordering on hysterical. She looked around the cabin, desperate for an ally. You can buy these online. She's a fraud. She's a college student playing a prank. Maya didn't move. She stood with the posture of someone who owned the very air they were breathing at 35,000 feet. Sarah, Maya repeated, her eyes never leaving Veronica. The cockpit, now. Sarah, pale and trembling, scrambled for the interphone. Her hands shook so badly she had to dial twice. Captain Miller, it's Sarah. You need to come out here. Immediately. It's a code red situation regarding passenger, regarding Director Sterling. 30 seconds later, the heavy cockpit door clicked and swung open. Captain James Miller stepped out. He was a silver-haired man with 30 years of flying experience, known for his nerves of steel. But as he stepped into the first-class cabin and saw the scene, the spilled bag, the soaked hoodie, the terrified junior stewardess, and Veronica clutching the ID card like a live grenade, his face drained of color. He looked at the girl in the hoodie. He didn't see a teenager. He saw the daughter of Marcus Sterling, the CEO and majority shareholder of the Royal Atlantic Group. He saw the woman who had fired the VP of Operations last month for cutting corners on safety checks. Miss Sterling, Captain Miller said, his voice cracking slightly. He removed his cap, a gesture of profound respect that silenced the entire cabin. I wasn't informed you were on the manifest. We would have rolled out the red carpet. I know you weren't informed, Captain, Maya said coolly. That's the point of a ghostly audit. But it seems the element of surprise was necessary. I've seen enough in 2 hours to ground this entire crew. Veronica let out a choked sound. Captain, you can't believe her. Look at her. She's dressed like a hooligan. She stole Mrs. van der Hoven's bracelet. Captain Miller turned to Veronica. His expression wasn't one of support. It was one of fury. Miss Halloway, give me that badge. Veronica handed it over, her hands shaking. Captain Miller didn't even need to scan it. He knew the weight of it. He handed it back to Maya with both hands. Miss Sterling, I apologize profusely. Has there been a security breach? There has been a severe breach of protocol, decency, and civil rights, Maya stated, clipping the badge onto her soaked hoodie. It looked jarring against the casual fabric, a symbol of absolute authority, clashing with the street-style clothing, a visual reminder of Veronica's mistake. Miss Halloway denied me my pre-ordered meal, poured water on my equipment intentionally, refused to serve me, and just now she illegally seized and searched my personal property without reasonable cause or witness, accusing me of grand larceny based solely on my appearance. She stole the bracelet, Veronica shrieked, doubling down because she had nowhere else to go. Mrs. van der Hoven said it was gone. It's in her pocket. I know it. The cabin turned to Mrs. van der Hoven. The elderly heiress looked mortified. She was patting her pockets, her face turning pink. Actually, Mrs. van der Hoven whispered. She reached into the deep folds of her pashmina scarf that was draped over her shoulders. Oh dear. She pulled out the diamond tennis bracelet. It had snagged on the wool of her scarf when she adjusted it. It hadn't been stolen. It hadn't even moved more than 6 inches from her neck. I found it, Mrs. van der Hoven said, her voice trembling with shame. It was stuck to my shawl. Oh, my heavens. I am so sorry. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a guillotine blade hanging in the air. Maya turned her gaze back to Veronica. You didn't look for the bracelet, Veronica. You didn't check the floor. You didn't ask her to check her clothes. You went straight for me. Why? Veronica opened her mouth, but no words came out. She was cornered. Racially motivated profiling. The man in 2B, Liam, spoke up. He had his phone out and was openly recording now. I have it all on video, Miss Sterling. The water spill, the refusal of service, the accusation. I'm an attorney, by the way, and I'd be happy to provide this footage to your legal department. Thank you, Maya said to Liam. Then she looked at the captain. Captain Miller, under Article 4 of the Sterling Corporate Governance Handbook, I am relieving Veronica Holloway of her duties, effective immediately. She is a liability to this flight and a stain on this airline. You can't do that! Veronica screamed, stepping forward, her hands balled into fists. I am the senior purser. I have 15 years of tenure. You can't fire me in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. I just did, Maya said calmly. Captain, remove her from the cabin. She is to take the jump seat in the rear galley for the remainder of the flight. She is not to speak to passengers. She is not to touch food service. If she resists, restrain her. Veronica lunged. It was a desperate, foolish move, born of panic and humiliation. She reached for Maya, perhaps to grab the badge, perhaps just to hurt the person who was destroying her life. You little witch! Veronica screeched. Captain Miller moved faster than a man his age should have been able to. He stepped between them, grabbing Veronica's wrist in a vice grip. Miss Holloway, he barked, his command voice filling the cabin. Stand down! That is a direct order! Do not touch her! Veronica struggled for a second, then went limp, realizing the magnitude of what she had almost done. Assaulting a corporate executive, that wasn't just firing, that was prison. Sarah, the captain ordered, escort Miss Holloway to the rear. Now. Sarah, looking like she wanted to melt into the floor, nodded. Come on, Veronica. Please don't make it worse. Veronica looked around the first-class cabin. The billionaire, the tech CEO, the heiress, the people she had spent her life trying to impress, trying to serve so she could feel adjacent to their power. They were all looking at her with absolute disgust. Not because she was a servant, but because she was cruel. She had been stripped of her kingdom. Head bowed, sobbing dry, angry tears, Veronica was marched out of the cabin, past the curtain, and into the long, humiliating walk through economy to the back of the plane. With Veronica gone, the atmosphere in first class shifted from toxic tension to a stunned, electrical buzz. The Queen had been deposed. Maya didn't sit back down immediately. She turned to Captain Miller. Captain, I apologize for the disruption to your flight deck duties. Please return to the controls. I will handle the cabin report. I need Sarah to bring me the purser's logbook and the digital manifest tablet. Of course, Miss Sterling. Anything you need, Captain Miller said. He wiped sweat from his brow. And, for the record, I had no idea she was behaving this way. If I had known... We'll discuss the culture of enabling later, Captain, Maya said, her voice firm but not unkind. Right now, the safety and comfort of the passengers is the priority. Please. The captain nodded and retreated to the cockpit. Maya sat down, but not in her seat. She sat on the ottoman, facing the aisle, transforming the space into a makeshift office. Sarah returned a moment later, breathless, carrying a thick leather binder and an iPad. Here, Miss Sterling, I put Veronica in the aft jump seat. She's crying. Let her cry, Maya said, taking the iPad. Tears don't erase liability. Maya unlocked the iPad using her master administrative code. The screen flashed red, granting her super user access. She began to scroll through the logs Veronica had entered for the flight. Unbelievable, Maya muttered. She looked up at the passengers who were all watching her, fascinated. Mr. Henderson, Maya said, addressing the tech CEO in 2A. Did you request 3 scotches before takeoff? Mr. Henderson blinked. I had 2. Why? Veronica logged 4, Maya said, tapping the screen. And she logged that I consumed 3 mini bottles of vodka from the carry-on supply. That's a lie, Liam, the attorney in 2B, shouted. She only had water. I know, Maya said. She was building a paper trail. If I had complained later, she would have pulled these logs to claim I was a drunk, disruptive passenger. It's a classic gaslighting technique used by corrupt staff to discredit complaints before they even happen. Maya turned the iPad toward Sarah. Sarah, did you sign off on this inventory check? Sarah leaned in, her eyes widening. No, that's my digital signature, but I didn't enter that. She must have used my passcode. Identity theft and falsifying federal aviation records, Maya listed, typing furiously into her own rugged laptop. The list keeps growing. Maya stood up and addressed the cabin properly. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to apologize on behalf of Royal Atlantic. What you witnessed today is the exact opposite of the values my family built this company on. I will be personally refunding all of your tickets for this flight. You will be receiving full vouchers for future travel as well. A murmur of appreciation went through the cabin. However, Maya continued, her expression serious. I need your help. To ensure Ms. Halloway is permanently removed from the industry and cannot do this to anyone else, I need witness statements. Would any of you be willing to go on the official record? I will, Mrs. van der Hoeven said immediately. She looked close to tears. I feel terrible, my dear. I am an old woman, and I let my panic cloud my judgment. But that woman, she manipulated me. She practically whispered in my ear that you were the thief before I even looked. It was wicked. Pure wickedness. I'll write a statement, Liam said. And I've got the video. I'll airdrop it to you right now. Me too, Mr. Henderson said. I don't like bullies, and I don't like people padding my drink tab. For the next 2 hours, the first-class cabin became a tribunal. Maya moved from seat to seat, recording voice notes, collecting digital signatures, and compiling a dossier that was thicker than the flight manual. She wasn't just firing Veronica, she was dismantling her. Maya accessed Veronica's HR file via the satellite internet. It took a while to load, but when it did, Maya's jaw tightened. Complaint. June 2024. Passenger alleged rude behavior. Status: dismissed by Halloway, seniority. Complaint. Feb 2025. Passenger claimed racial bias in seating. Status: unfounded per Halloway report. Complaint. Aogi 2025. Junior flight attendant requested transfer due to hostile work environment. Status: ignored. She's been doing this for years, Maya whispered to Sarah. She's been using her seniority to bully junior staff into silence and dismiss passenger complaints as unruly behavior. She's created a fiefdom up here. Sarah looked down at her hands. She told us that if we reported her, she'd make sure we never flew international again. She knows the schedulers. She has friends in high places. Not as high as me, Maya said coldly. Maya typed a final command into her laptop. She drafted an email directly to the board of directors, the VP of HR, and the legal counsel of Royal Atlantic. Subject: immediate termination security threat, flight 882. Attachment: evidence, package, Halloway.zip to the board. I am invoking emergency bylaw. 12. Veronica Halloway is to be met by airport police and corporate security upon arrival at Heathrow. Charges will be filed for falsification of records, theft of service, harassment, and assault. I want her pension frozen pending the investigation. She is done. Maya hit send. The whoosh sound of the email leaving her outbox felt like a gavel banging down. Back in the galley, Sarah was preparing the landing meal. She looked at Maya with a mix of awe and fear. "Miss Sterling? What happens when we land? The police? Are they really coming for her?" "They are," Maya said, taking a sip of the cranberry juice Sarah had finally brought her, served in a crystal glass this time. "But the police are the least of her worries. The internet is going to be far worse." Maya pointed to Liam's phone in 2B. He was uploading the video to social media. The caption read, "Royal Atlantic flight attendant attacks black teen executive. Wait for the badge reveal. Washa Karma, Lashas, Royal Atlantic source. Justice." "It's already trending," Liam called out. 10,000 views in 5 minutes. Maya looked out the window at the clouds below. The sun was setting, casting long, dark shadows. "By the time we touch down in London, the whole world is going to know who Veronica Holloway is. She wanted to be the center of attention? She wanted to be the queen of the cabin? Well, long live the queen." The plane began its descent. The engines whined, shifting pitch. The drama at 35,000 feet was over. The reckoning on the ground was just beginning. The wheels of Flight 882 slammed onto the tarmac at Heathrow, a jarring thud that echoed the pit in Veronica Holloway's stomach. As the massive aircraft taxied toward Terminal 3, the usual cheerful "Welcome to London" announcement was noticeably absent. Instead, Captain Miller's voice came over the PA system, grave and clipped. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have arrived at the gate. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. We have authorities boarding the aircraft to deal with a security incident. No one is to stand up until the police have cleared the cabin." A ripple of whispers moved through economy. In the very back row, squeezed into the jump seat usually reserved for trainees, Veronica stared blankly at the metal bulkhead. She had stopped crying. Now, she was just numb, her mind frantically trying to construct a narrative. She was aggressive, Veronica told herself. I was protecting the ship. The captain overreacted. "I can call the union rep. I can fix this." The plane shuddered to a halt. The fasten seatbelt sign remained illuminated. Through the window, passengers could see flashing blue lights reflecting off the wet tarmac. 3 Metropolitan police cruisers and a black unmarked SUV were parked right next to the jet bridge. The cabin door opened. The cold London air rushed in, mixing with the stale, recycled atmosphere of the plane. 4 officers boarded, 2 uniformed constables, and 2 detectives in plain clothes. They didn't stop in the galley. They walked straight into the first-class cabin. Maya Sterling was still sitting on the ottoman of seat 1A, her laptop closed, her badge glinting on her chest. One of the detectives, a tall man with a weary face, approached her. He glanced at the badge, then nodded respectfully. "Director Sterling, Detective Inspector Graves, we received the priority dispatch from Royal Atlantic Corporate Security. We're at your disposal." "Thank you, Inspector," Maya said, standing up. She looked tired but composed. "The individual in question is in the rear galley. I'd like her removed from the aircraft before general deplaning begins." "Understood," Graves said. He motioned to the uniformed officers. "Fetch her." The walk from the back of the plane to the front is long. On a Boeing 777, it feels like a mile. For Veronica Holloway, it was the Green Mile. The officers marched her up the aisle. She wasn't handcuffed yet, but the officer's grip on her arm was iron tight. As she passed through economy, passengers craned their necks. "Is that the rude stewardess?" someone whispered. "Yeah, the one who yelled at the kid." "Good riddance." Veronica kept her chin up, trying to summon the last shreds of her arrogance. "I am the victim here," she chanted internally. But when she crossed the curtain into business class, the atmosphere changed. These passengers had heard the rumors filtering back from the front. They looked at her with open disdain. And then she entered first class, the kingdom she had ruled for 15 years. Maya was standing there, flanked by the detectives. Captain Miller stood by the cockpit door, arms crossed. Sarah was in the corner, looking down at her shoes. Veronica stopped. She looked at Maya. The girl in the hoodie was now holding the power of a god. "Officer, this is a mistake!" Veronica blurted out, her voice shrill. "That girl is a fraud. She's the one who should be arrested. She assaulted me. She hacked the flight manifest." Inspector Graves didn't even look at Veronica. He looked at Maya. "Director, do you want to press charges for the assault and the theft of service?" "Absolutely," Maya said calmly. "And I want to add a charge of interference with flight crew duties, specifically falsifying safety logs. That's a federal crime." "Wait!" Veronica screamed as the officer pulled out the handcuffs. The cold metal clicked around her wrists, the sound of her career ending. "You can't do this. I know people. I know the Vice President of Operations." Maya took a step forward. She pulled out her phone and played a voicemail on speaker. "Maya, this is Dad. I just saw the email. The board is in emergency session. We've accepted the VP of Operations resignation as of 5 minutes ago for failure to supervise. You have full clearance to clean house. Great work, sweetie." The color drained from Veronica's face so completely she looked like a corpse. "Dad, Marcus Sterling is your father?" Veronica whispered. "Yes," Maya said. "And the vice president you were going to call. He's gone. You have no friends left, Veronica. You have no leverage. You have nothing." Maya nodded to the officers. "Get her off my plane." Veronica Holloway, the terror of Flight 882, began to sob. It wasn't a pretty cry. It was a guttural, ugly sound of total defeat. She was dragged out of the aircraft door, down the jet bridge, and into the waiting police van. As she disappeared, the first-class cabin erupted into spontaneous applause. Mrs. van der Hoeven clapped the loudest. The heavy metal doors of the police van slammed shut, sealing Veronica Holloway inside a cage of wire mesh and hard plastic. The sound was final, a dull thud that echoed the sudden, violent end of her career. As the vehicle pulled away from the tarmac of Heathrow Terminal 3, flashing blue lights bouncing off the wet concrete, Veronica sat in stunned silence. She was still wearing her pristine Royal Atlantic uniform, the signature scarlet scarf tied perfectly around her neck, but now it felt like a costume for a play that had been cancelled. Across from her, a young constable watched her with mild curiosity. Veronica caught his eye and instinctively straightened her spine, attempting to summon the authority she had wielded at 35,000 feet. "This is a misunderstanding," she said, though her voice trembled. "Do you know who I am? I'm the senior purser for the flagship fleet. I have dinner with vice presidents. Once I make a phone call, you're going to be very embarrassed." The constable didn't blink. "You're being processed for assault and interference with flight operations, love. The only phone call you're making is to a solicitor, if you can afford one." That was the first crack in the glass. The second came when they arrived at the precinct. Veronica expected to be whisked into a private office, offered tea, and apologized to. Instead, she was processed like a common criminal. Her fingerprints, tips that she had spent hundreds of pounds manicuring, were pressed onto a glass scanner. Her mugshot was taken under harsh fluorescent lights that highlighted every wrinkle she tried so hard to hide. She was placed in a holding cell with a woman who smelled of stale gin and resentment. Veronica sat on the hard bench, pulling her knees to her chest, waiting for the cavalry to arrive. She waited for the airline's legal team to burst in and demand her release. They never came. While Veronica sat in a cell, the world outside was burning her effigy. Liam, the attorney in seat 2B, hadn't just posted a video. He had ignited a cultural movement. The clip, titled "Flight Attendant vs. Undercover Boss, Instant Karma," had hit 14 million views on TikTok within 6 hours of landing. The algorithm loved it. The video showed everything: the sneer on Veronica's face as she poured the water, the way she snatched the bag, and the earth-shattering moment Maya clipped the holographic badge onto her hoodie. The internet detectives were ruthless. Within an hour, Veronica's identity was doxed. Her LinkedIn profile, which bragged about her commitment to excellence and high-value client management, was flooded with thousands of comments. Excellence? You spilled water on a kid because you didn't like her hoodie. Imagine working 15 years just to get taken down by a teenager. Embarrassing. Royal Atlantic, if you don't fire her, I'm cancelling my platinum membership. The hashtag Voshka the Badge Drop began trending globally. Teenagers were filming skits where they pretended to be disrespected by service workers, only to reveal they were the CEO of the universe. It was funny to them. For Royal Atlantic, it was a PR nightmare of catastrophic proportions. By the time Veronica was released on bail the next morning, paid for by her terrified sister, not the airline, she walked out into a world that despised her. She turned on her phone, which had been returned in a plastic bag. It vibrated continuously for 10 minutes, a ceaseless buzzing of hate mail, text messages from friends telling her to lose their numbers, and news alerts featuring her own face. One email stood out. It was from Royal Atlantic Human Resources. Subject: Notice of immediate suspension, pending termination. It was short, cold, and legally watertight. She was banned from airline property. Her access pass was deactivated. Her company credit card was cancelled. Veronica stood on the sidewalk outside the police station, the London drizzle matting her hair, and screamed. 3 days later, the atmosphere on the top floor of Royal Atlantic's London headquarters was suffocating. The air conditioning was set to a chill, but the executives around the mahogany table were sweating. Maya Sterling sat at the head of the table. She looked nothing like the girl in the hoodie. She wore a tailored charcoal suit that cost more than most people's cars, her hair pulled back in a severe, elegant bun. To her right sat her father, Marcus Sterling, the CEO. He hadn't said a word since the meeting started. He was letting Maya hunt. The stock has dipped 4.2%, the chief financial officer, a man named Arthur Pence, said nervously. He wiped his glasses. The market is reacting to the viral sentiment. They fear a class action lawsuit regarding discriminatory practices. They should fear it, Maya said, her voice cutting through the room like a jagged piece of glass. Because I'm the one who would lead it. She tapped a remote, and the massive screen behind her illuminated. It wasn't a graph of profits. It was a timeline of Veronica Holloway's career. I spent the last 48 hours auditing the personnel files of the first-class crew, Maya began. Veronica Holloway was not a rogue agent. She was a protected asset. Maya pointed to a series of red flags on the screen. 2019. Complaint of aggressive behavior towards a junior staff member. Dismissed. 2021. Passenger claimed she refused to serve him based on his attire, marked as passenger intoxication by Holloway. No investigation. 2024. 3 junior flight attendants requested transfers from her crew, citing mental cruelty. All requests denied. Maya turned her gaze to the VP of HR, a woman named Linda who was currently trying to make herself invisible. Linda, Maya said softly. Why were these ignored? Well, Maya. Director Sterling, Linda stammered. Veronica was effective. Her cabins always scored high on efficiency. She managed the inventory well. We thought it was just personality clashes. You prioritized inventory over humanity, Maya corrected. And because of that, you allowed a toxicity to fester that has now cost us millions in brand equity. Maya stood up and paced the room. Here is the new reality. I am implementing the Holloway Protocol, effective immediately. Any complaint involving discrimination or abuse of power triggers an external audit. No internal reviews. No friends covering for friends. That will be expensive, Arthur Pence noted. Not as expensive as losing the entire youth market, Maya shot back. And as for Veronica Holloway, the room went silent. We are not just firing her, Maya announced. We are filing a civil suit for damages to the brand. We are contesting her pension on the grounds of gross misconduct and violation of the morality clause. She leaves with nothing. Not a penny. That seems harsh, Linda ventured. She gave us 15 years. Maya leaned on the table, looking Linda dead in the eye. She tried to have me arrested for being black in first class. She humiliated a 70-year-old woman to cover her own lies. She destroyed the careers of junior staff for sport. Harsh is what she did. This is just accounting. Marcus Sterling finally spoke. He smiled, a proud, terrifying smile. You heard the director. Make it happen. And Linda, clear your desk. You're done too. The legal notices hit Veronica like a barrage of artillery. First, the termination letter. Then, the lawsuit for $500,000 in reputation damages. Then, the letter from the pension fund informing her that her accumulated benefits were frozen pending the litigation. Veronica sat in her upscale Kensington apartment, an apartment she could barely afford, leased to keep up appearances, and watched her life disintegrate. She called her union rep, a man she had flirted with for years to get favors. He blocked her number. She called her friends in the industry. They didn't answer. Within 2 months, the money ran out. She sold her designer bags, her jewelry, even the car. It wasn't enough. The eviction notice came in a cream-colored envelope that looked deceptively polite. She had to move. She ended up in a cramped, damp studio apartment in Croydon, miles away from the glamorous city centre. But the worst part wasn't the poverty. It was the infamy. She tried to get a job. She applied to other airlines, obviously. Rejected instantly. She applied to hotel chains. Rejected. She applied to high-end retail stores. One manager at a luxury department store actually laughed when he saw her resume. Veronica Holloway? The badge lady? You think we'd let you near our customers? We'd have a riot. She was radioactive. The Google search of her name brought up nothing but scorn. She had become a meme, a symbol of everything people hated about entitled authority. Desperation is a powerful, humbling agent. 6 months after Flight 882, Veronica Holloway, the woman who wouldn't serve tap water to a teenager without a sneer, walked into a temp agency specializing in industrial cleaning and maintenance. I need work, she whispered to the clerk. Anything. The clerk, a bored teenager chewing gum, didn't recognize her. We have a night shift opening. Sanitation crew at Heathrow. It's minimum wage, heavy lifting. You want it? Veronica closed her eyes. Heathrow. The scene of her glory. Now the scene of her penance. I'll take it. 8 months after the incident, Heathrow Terminal 5 was bustling with the morning rush. The air smelled of expensive coffee and jet fuel, the smell Veronica used to love, but now associated with the aching in her lower back. She was working the kiosk shift at Cafe Nero. Her uniform was a polo shirt that was too tight and an apron stained with milk froth. Her hands, once manicured red, were chapped and raw from the sanitizing solution she used to wipe tables. "Excuse me, this table is dirty," a customer snapped. "I'm getting to it," Veronica muttered, keeping her head down. She sprayed the table and wiped it, her movements sluggish. "Excuse me," a voice said, a familiar voice. Veronica froze. The rag stopped moving. She knew that voice. It was calm, authoritative, and laced with a terrifying kindness. She slowly looked up. Standing on the other side of the low glass partition was Maya Sterling. Maya looked phenomenal. She was wearing a cream-colored trench coat over a business suit, holding a leather travel folio. She wasn't alone. She was flanked by Sarah, who looked radiant in her new senior purser uniform, and two other executives who were hanging on Maya's every word. They were heading to the first-class lounge. They were heading to the life Veronica used to have. Maya had stopped because she was waiting for Sarah to grab a water bottle. She hadn't noticed the cleaner yet. But as Veronica lifted her head, their eyes locked. Time seemed to suspend. The noise of the terminal faded into a dull roar. Veronica felt a rush of heat climb up her neck. Shame, hot and agonizing, flooded her veins. She wanted to run. She wanted to hide under the table. But she was paralyzed. She saw herself through Maya's eyes, aged, broken, wiping up crumbs for minimum wage. For a second, Veronica braced herself. She expected Maya to laugh. She expected Maya to pull out her phone and film her, to post a "Where are they now?" video that would destroy the tiny shred of life she had left. She expected the final blow. But Maya didn't laugh. Maya's expression softened. It wasn't pity. Pity would have been bearable. It was indifference. It was the look you give a stranger or a piece of furniture. It was the realization that to Maya Sterling, Veronica Holloway was no longer a villain, no longer a threat, no longer a monster. She was nothing. Maya simply nodded, a barely perceptible dip of her chin, acknowledging a fellow human being, and then turned away. "Ready, Sarah?" Maya asked. "Ready, Director," Sarah beamed. "Let's go. We have a schedule to keep." Maya walked away, her heels clicking rhythmically on the polished floor. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. Veronica watched them go. She watched until they disappeared through the frosted glass doors of the VIP wing. Then she looked down at her chapped hands, gripped the dirty rag, and turned back to the table. "I missed a spot," she whispered to herself. She scrubbed the table, and then the next one, and the one after that. The plane engines roared outside, taking people to places she would never see again. And that, my friends, is the brutal, beautiful reality of karma. Veronica spent 15 years thinking that her badge made her better than everyone else. She thought she could judge people based on their clothes, their age, or the color of their skin. But she learned the hard way that the higher you fly, the harder you fall. In the end, she didn't just lose her job, she lost her identity. She went from sipping champagne in the galley to scrubbing tables in the terminal, forced to serve the very people she used to look down on. It's a reminder to all of us. Treat the janitor with the same respect as the CEO, because you never know when the roles might reverse. I want to know what you think. Was Maya's punishment too harsh, or was it exactly what Veronica deserved? Have you ever seen a power trip backfire this badly in real life? Tell me your stories in the comments below. If you enjoyed this long-form revenge story, please hit that like button to help the algorithm and subscribe for more drama, twists, and karma. Thanks for listening, and until next time, stay kind or stay grounded.